Hello everyone, Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me today, it's Alasdair Gold. Nice of you to join us after missing out on episode 200.
Do you know what? I don't know what's more disappointing, the result of the weekend or the fact that I missed the 200th episode of the show. Although I'm going to claim that if you include the trailer, the little mini trailer that we recorded as well, technically the previous episode was the 200th one. We just weren't aware of it and didn't mention it at any point during the show. I was very disappointed when I realised that the press conference was going to clash with the recording. But I'm here for, let's call it officially, 201. Which will be a really happy going through everything that's happened in the last couple of days.
Yeah, we've got another defeat to talk about following Tottenham's 2-0 loss against Fulham at Craven Cottage on Sunday, as well as reflecting on, multiple things, what happened or didn't happen in that game. Then we've gone to also talk about what's happening at Hotspur Way over the next couple of weeks, because it's going to be a quiet period for Spurs. Usually it'll be just one weekend without a game. Premier League fixtures will then be played the following weekend, but it's FA Cup football on the agenda at the end of March. That means 2.5 weeks for Spurs' next game, and that's away at Chelsea. And we know how Spurs usually fare at Stamford Bridge, which should make it quite interesting. So first things first then, a number of international players have gone away. Ange has limited players to work with, let's say, but a lot of goalkeepers.
Yay! Four goalkeepers to work with. That'll fix everything. Do you know what? Normally, international breaks are like the bane of my existence. I think they're the bane of most people's existence as well. And no one wants the season to be interrupted or the flow or anything. I think right now everyone needs to clear their heads. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for everyone to have a little bit of a change of environment. It's such a stupid couple of days. They have the Thursday night, they have a great result, they get through to the quarterfinals of the Europa League. Everyone's like, yay, there's something we can cling to. And then they go to Fulham, and it's probably the most boring first half in Premier League football that we've seen this season from two teams. Second half, felt like Spurs were getting back on top, kind of getting some control of the game. Looked like they were probably going to be the team that scored. And then they shoot themselves in the foot in the last 15 minutes or 12 minutes or so. And everything changes again. The mood goes back down and the confidence drops too. So I think, having 2.5 weeks or so for everyone just to go away, these players most of them going to play for their countries elsewhere, just all of us escaping, me finally getting an international break holiday, because Guesty normally books them up 5 years in advance. I think it's just desperately needed.
I'm not sure about that claim.
Sorry, 4 years in advance.
Yeah, so the players remaining behind, 4 goalkeepers. There's Anton Kinski, Fraser Forster, Brandon Austin, and Alfie Whiteman. Outfield players, Mickey van der Ven, Jed Spence, Sergio Reguilon, James Maddison, Timo Werner. There's 4 injured players, one of which isn't going to play until next season. That's Radu Dragusin. And there's Kevin Danzo, Dejan Kulusevski, and Richarlison. So you'd be hoping 3 of those players can, step up the fitness over the next fortnight and put themselves into a good position to return at some point soon after the international breaks. It's going to be needed, given Spurs' patchy form and the huge importance of, Spurs going far and hopefully winning the Europa League in Bilbao in May. In terms of the fit players remaining behind, we spoke about myself and Wilma spoke about on the previous podcast how unlucky Jed Spence and James Maddison were to miss out on the England squad. So chance for those to get in a couple of extra training, as is the case with Sergio Reguilon, who's just not going to play really in Ange's team, with everyone fit and available pretty much at the moment. Timo Werner could certainly do with the extra training and opportunities to play, even though there's a lot of options ahead of him. The Mickey van der Ven, a good couple of weeks now to, really up his fitness, because played 30 minutes against Bournemouth, 60 minutes against AZ, wasn't involved at the weekend against Fulham, was an unused substitute. But I think what the past couple of games has shown is the importance of Romero and van der Ven in defence for Spurs. So Van der Ven's going to be needed to play consistent games coming up. Chelsea, Southampton there in quick succession. Then there's the Eintracht Frankfurt game. So fingers crossed, a really good opportunity for Mickey to work on his fitness and be ready to go come that game at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, definitely. All of those, I think even the 3 injured players that could, should hopefully come back in the coming weeks, all of them are crucial right now. Danso at the weekend would have been, for me, probably the man to come on, but he wasn't there to do so. I don't think with Ben Davies on the pitch, you were likely to bring on Van der Ven to play alongside him. It's weird, isn't it? You often see right-footed players playing alongside each other as centre-backs, but left-footed, you don't really see 2 left-footed ones. It's quite rare. I don't know whether they're just so specialised in where they're used to playing that it's more alien for them, perhaps, whereas right-footed players have to play on the left more. I don't know. That's me utterly guessing. But Danso, I think, would have been the one to come on. And Danso up against Sessegnon, that second goal probably doesn't happen, power-wise and strength-wise. And then you've got Richarlison, Solanke again having to kind of be running to the ground straight away after coming back, playing 3 games in, 7 days or so. And Kulusevski, I don't think you can pick a team, and I think this was one of the key points from the weekend, that doesn't have either Maddison or Kulusevski in it. I just think this Postecoglou system needs a playmaker. So having Decky there as an alternative for Maddison is just so crucial. Getting them both in the same team is great as well. But yeah, these kind of players, there's all kind of important bits and pieces for them, really, to kind of come back. And it's a weird time when there's so few players. I can't imagine training sessions are going to be the most intense things in the world. You'll be kind of supplemented by a few academy players. Although, yeah, there's been this weird kind of, not quite culling, but quite a few England youth internationals haven't kind of been called up this time. So there's probably a few more in the kind of youth ranks to spread around the academy over the next fortnight or so in training sessions too. Although probably not too many in the under 21s. But either way, I think they've got from tomorrow a few days off, which I think for Jed Spence has probably come at a good time. He was getting a lot of game time. Maddison, I mean, we'll talk about the game. I still think he should have started. I don't think fitness-wise, he was in a state where he desperately, unless there was a knock we're not aware of, I think he should have started. He's been subbed about 3 of the last 5 Premier League games, hasn't he? He's come off the bench. So I didn't get that one, but that's a whole other thing. It's just an international break that I think it's more for the recharge, the change of environment more than anything else. And yeah, just for everyone to get away from the misery for a while.
Some positive news, though, over the international break. Jamie Donnelly's going to be playing his football for Northern Ireland rather than England. It's been outstanding at Leyton Orient this season, so he's in Michael O'Neill's squad for the upcoming friendlies against Switzerland and Sweden. Chance to come up against Tottenham teammate Lucas Bergvall in the middle of the pitch when they're playing Sweden next week. I mean, when you're looking at the England squad, the amount of attacking midfielders there are, and I mean, there's no guarantee Jamie's going to work his way into the Tottenham 11 over the coming years. We just don't know how that's going to pan out.
Of course.
So to choose Northern Ireland, you can fully understand it. To get his international career up and running really on at a young age is going to be good for him, playing against these good opponents, good international players. And the thing is, there's a 48-team World Cup next year. So there's a chance Northern Ireland qualify. So Donnelly may well be playing out in the States, Canada or Mexico come next summer if everything goes to plan.
I think it's an entirely logical decision. It's one of those where, of course, being in England, we're going to kind of naturally think, oh, why wouldn't you want to play for England? And I think he's got the ability that maybe at some point in his career he would have got onto into the England team if, again, that's a big if everything goes right for you in your career at this point because you're still so young. But it is a big risk, and you're pinning your hopes on maybe one day playing for England, whereas there's a big kind of Northern Irish kind of side to the family. I think it's his dad's side, and and I get it. I think there's an opportunity there to have a very talented player. And I'm sure they've been desperate to kind of get him into the kind of setup there as well for a while. I think he's flitted between, hasn't he, England and Northern Ireland at youth level. And with the ability he's got, I'm not comparing him directly to this player because obviously it's one of the most successful British player of all time. But he's got the potential to be a Bale type figure for Northern Ireland in being this really creative player who could be a terrific player for them for years to come, a bit of a talisman if his career continues as we all hope it will. So yeah, I absolutely get it. And your point about the World Cup's a great one as well. It's fast tracking international. He could have a really long international career, which would be fantastic. And yeah, I absolutely get it. One day it could be England's loss. But like you say, there's so much competition right now. There's no guarantee he would have kind of made it.
No, they're building quite a good young team as well. Northern Ireland is Conor Bradley at Liverpool, Isaac Price, who used to be at Everton, who's now at West Brom. I think Trey Hume, Sunderland. So some good youngsters there, and maybe a team for years to come with Donnelly playing a pivotal role in that. Right, let's move on to the Fulham game now.
I was trying to avoid it. I was trying to talk about everything else, but
yeah, needs to be discussed. We'll start with the team selection. 7 changes from the win over AZ in the Europa League. I think he got it wrong. The amount of changes didn't need to make 7, in my opinion. I mean, he got criticised at Craven Cottage 18 months ago in the Carabao Cup when that was like 10 or 11 changes and Spurs lost on penalties. I again think he made too many changes. I can understand a few of them, but as you were saying at the start, I don't think there was any need to rest James Maddison. Don't think there was any need to rest Son. I know it's a quick turnaround, Thursday to Sunday football, but those 2 players I've just named were substitutes the previous weekend against Bournemouth. Bentancur coming into the team, fully understand. Archie Gray as well. But I just don't think there needed to be 7 changes. And in the end, it proved costly. Spurs losing because of a couple really poor late goals to concede.
Yeah, I think there had to be some changes.
Yeah.
I think everyone kind of acknowledges that. I don't think you could start Van de Ven again. I think I understand that. But I suppose in his mind, what he's doing there is 2 days of recovery between matches for Spurs, 8 days for Fulham. And yes, it's a much fresher side you're coming up against, so you need that bit more energy. But I just felt he slightly went too far. And the logic afterwards with some of them was that he wanted to get minutes into these players because there's this, I think it's 7 games in 23, 24 days after the international break. So I get that, but a lot of these players also are going off and going to play international football. So it's not like they're just going to sit there doing nothing. I think Maddison's the key one for me. I didn't get Maddison coming out of the team unless there's a knock. Again, we're not party to everything that goes on behind the scenes, but if there's no knock, I didn't get the Maddison one because, as I said, if you don't have a playmaker in that team, it's too reliant on wing play, and that's too easy to stop. It just is. You can just kind of easily counter play teams that are only ever going to play down the wing. And you could see even in the first half, there's only 1 point where they got down the wing, and that was Tell had a good little run and then pulled it across the face of goal. And yeah, it was all too predictable. And then at the break they changed a few things. Bergvall came in. I think Bergvall as well, I can understand why a lot of people would have wanted him to start again, but he did go off with cramp at the end of the game. It's not like he was in an ideal physical kind of position to play. And we also got to see Archie Gray midfield, which is something that a lot of us have been calling to see. I think for me, I'd agree with you. I think Maddison and Son. I think Son, you could maybe argue in his 30s, 2 games in 3 days, it is probably a push. But certainly with Maddison, there's no reasoning behind that's obvious for us to see from the outside. I was trying to think of the other ones. Doggy was always going to come in. Bentancur was always going to come in. Bissouma, in any other world, would make sense. But in what we saw, once again, he's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I mean, Brendan Johnson wasn't much better, but it's a different kind of thing. With Bissouma, you look at him as the senior player. He's 28 years old, and he looked like a kid that had just gone out there for the first time. He was panicking, playing dreadful passes. There was one where a doggy was kind of about 6 foot away from him, starting to go forward. All he had to do was play a diagonal ball in front of him, and he played it behind him. It made no sense. And the amount of times he got caught not really knowing where the Fulham players were around him, something's gone so wrong with Bissouma. I mean, what do you think's happened to Yves Bissouma?
It's hard to put a finger on exactly what's happened, but 100% he's played himself out of the team. I think if you're looking at
Out of the club?
I'd probably say so in the summer. I think you need someone who you can rely on in the middle of the park. And I mean, I said it on a couple of podcasts ago. When you look at Bissouma's Spurs career, you're probably looking at that 3-month run when Ange first came in.
Yeah.
Because he barely featured in his debut campaign at the club. And then the injuries, suspensions, AFCON participation towards the end of last season meant he couldn't get his form back up to his previous levels. And having been an undroppable last year, he might have only started, about 8 or 9 games in the Premier League, something like that. He's certainly played himself out of the team. And I think it's past 5 Premier League games he's come off at half-time 3 times, something like that.
Yeah, 3 of the last 5, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, to get him back to his best, he needs to be playing regularly, but he's not doing enough in his playing time to have him on the pitch for a full 90 minutes. And 100% played himself out of the team. Lucas Bergval's jumps ahead of him by quite some distance now.
Head and shoulders ahead of him, yeah.
In the pecking order. It's one of these that when he's going to come to making changes in midfield, I don't think he's going to get a look in, unfortunately, and that's because of his form.
Yeah. I mean, why would you? There's so much quality there, but he's just squandered it. It's just gone. It's just everything that was kind of good about him, how dominating he could be. I mean, the player we saw at Brighton at times. I mean, yeah, people at Brighton would say he was inconsistent, but it feels like at Spurs that inconsistency has hit new levels. And yeah, Postecoglou got criticised after the game for criticising him, but it wasn't. He was asked about him, and he was asked about him 2 or 3 times as well. Because to be fair, I asked the first time, and then it was kind of followed up as well. So it wasn't like he was just like desperate to talk about Bissouma and say how poor he'd been. He was just asked, what's he not doing right at the moment? And he just kind of just went into it and just said he's just not doing kind of what he needs to be doing right now. He's not offering enough. And he put it down to a lack of confidence as well, which is probably true. And again, international break, maybe going away, maybe that will help him. Maybe playing for Mali, getting some minutes under his belt, different environment might help. But I just wouldn't put him anywhere near a starting lineup right now. And that's the problem when you want to rotate. What are you going to do if you can't even turn to a senior player in the squad? It's just not good enough. And Brennan Johnson came in and offered very little as well. He looks like his confidence is on the floor right now. I mean, this is Spurs' top scorer. I know people like to kind of criticize him and say he's not doing this or that, but he's got 14 goals. I think he's like 3 ahead of anyone else that's near in the goal scoring charts. So we know he can do it, but he just looks like he doesn't kind of believe in himself. And I think he's back-to-back Premier League games. He's been taken off at half-time as well.
It was the same change against Bournemouth. Exact same change with Bissouma and Johnson coming off for Sarr and Bergvall.
Yeah, and to be fair, it could have been Tell or Johnson that came off at half-time. Tell wasn't great either. I think maybe that one little run we spoke about kind of saved him in a way. And to be fair to him, I felt he was better on the right in the second half. But yeah, this is the problem, isn't it? If you're going to this has been almost like a classic age-old Spurs thing, is that rotating players and the players that are coming in just aren't playing to the level of the starting players that you want. And it's like, it kind of stuffs you really, because you can't make changes. You tire other players, they get injured. Just this like the circle of life at Tottenham. It really is. It was just a mess in that respect. But I'd still think Maddison was key to it all.
Yeah. Whereas previously, like of Bissouma and Johnson, if they'd not played well, they were probably always going to get another chance in the next game because of the amount of injuries. But that's just not the case now. There's a lot of options out wide in midfield. And yeah, it's really strange with Johnson just didn't test Anthony Robinson down
No.
Fulham's left at all.
He's
And
not running at players, is he? He's not running at them. His confidence
no,
in his running has gone.
no. I mean, Spurs were poor in the first half.
Yeah.
Just didn't threaten Fulham at all. But yeah, and this is Brendan Johnson, who's Tottenham's top scorer. And I've seen some fans like question him, like Johnson shouldn't be in the team at all. And what I'd probably say is, where would Spurs be in the table if it wasn't for Johnson and these goals? But you needing both from Johnson, the goals and the performances. It's just not the case, unfortunately. And you've got players like Wilson Odobert who can come into the team now and make an impact, as he did do against AZ in the Europa League.
But he was never going to start, was he? I mean, that's the other thing with Odobert. You can't start him again. That would be 3 in a row for him. He's been out for months.
Yeah, and he's been playing a lot of football of late, and I think it shows his place in Andrew's thinking, the amount of times he's been in the starting 11. But given those injuries, you do have to just manage his minutes.
He actually was poor when he came on, Odobert.
Yeah.
He immediately gave away the ball, and it wasn't good after that either.
I mean, he had 3 players around him, didn't he, at that time?
But he ran into that. He kind of ran into that cul-de-sac.
Yeah, just on the goal then. Just prior to that, there was a change. Christian Romero, that's another talking point, him coming off, James Maddison coming on. You can understand Maddison coming off, but I suppose really in a position where Romero needed to have his minutes managed.
That's a really difficult one. I get it. I absolutely, I would like to keep him on there. Was he just physically able to continue after 3 starts in 7 days? I don't know. And also, there was a weird moment in the first half where I think it was after he'd just been thrown away by Calvin Bassey, the most ridiculous kind of. He was like, I've never seen him thrown like that. And I think it was like a mixture of embarrassment in that. But then he sliced a kick not long after that, and he went down on the floor. He looked absolutely gutted. He had his hands over his eyes, like he was getting quite emotional, like probably thinking he's going to miss the international break, miss more time with an injury, whatever. And physio was about to come on, and then suddenly they waved him away and just said, no, you don't have to come on, that's fine. And it was like, okay, but I can only wonder whether he played on with something that was bothering him. I don't know. And maybe they got to half time and said, give us another 15, 20 minutes or so and we'll see how we go. But
like he did against Bournemouth. Basically,
but it's hindsight, isn't it? After a game, it looked like a key kind of decision, taking him out of there. We saw what happened next and the decisions that were made. I suppose the question is, and this would be to any fan, I guess, as well, what would you have done in that moment? Let's say, I suppose first off, would you have taken Romero off? And that's a difficult one to kind of say. And if so, who would you have replaced him for?
Difficult one. I think if you're taking Romero off, I'd be putting Van der Ven on just to keep it solid at the back. And you're not pushing Mickey too much then. After 60 minutes in midweek, you're just giving him another 30 to finish the game. But
where does he play, left or right?
Well, it's one or the other. It's one or the other. It's Mickey at left or Ben Davies at
I think it would have to be Davies on the right, wouldn't it? With his experience, you'd think.
But,
we saw him on the right with Cess late on.
Yeah, but I think what the past 2 games has shown is because when Mickey came off against AZ, Spurs then concede 3 minutes later. Romero comes off, Spurs concede a couple of poor goals. This just shows the importance of having at least one of those 2 players in the back line.
Absolutely.
Ideally, both of them.
Yes.
And fingers crossed it does get to that point after the international break, because fingers crossed the fitness levels will be better and they can start games consistently next to each other. But
do you want to guess how many games both have started in the Premier League? Just individually.
Individually, Romero probably about 9, Van der Ven 7.
You got one of the numbers right, but the wrong person. So Romero has started 14 Premier League matches.
Right.
And Van der Ven is 9.
Okay.
It's just, that's ridiculous, isn't it? That's just like those 2 together are the cornerstone of that whole team, really, the way it plays. And you've barely been able to have them on the pitch.
Yeah, I think if Romero's on the pitch, those 2 goals probably don't happen.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, because I mean, I was watching the game and he was said in commentary, Spurs heading to the first 0-0 game since Brentford away 3 years ago. Classic commentator's curse. And then Rodrigo Muniz went and scored, and that was poor from Odebear losing the ball, but I think Spurs could have coped better defensively. But there was just like a split second when I think there was an opportunity to close down the ball in the box, and they didn't.
Maddison kind of sliced it away like a half clearance, wasn't it?
Yeah, good finish from Muniz. Took his chance after coming on, and then really, really good finish from Sessegnon. But I think if Romero's in the back line, if Danzo's in the back line, or Van der Ven, Sessegnon's not bullying them and coming away with the ball. And outstanding finish. What a moment for him. I mean, there was no emotion on his face at all when he scored, just walking towards, I think it was a Hammersmith end. But you couldn't blame him in that situation if he did score, if he did celebrate.
Yeah.
Given everything what's happened. But I think, just showed his class really towards the club who he was with 5 years, limited appearances. Unfortunately, didn't go his way, but hopefully brighter days are ahead for him at Fulham.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be Cesc, didn't it? And I mean, we've spoken so many times over the years on this podcast. We kind of always felt quite sorry for him because we could kind of see what he was going through. And I'd rather it happened against another team, of course. But yes, it was a beautiful finish. It was like right foot as well. You know, his weaker foot. Ben Davies just made a complete and utter mess of it. As soon as you let a ball bounce, you're giving yourself a problem. And then there was even a moment where he was almost in the good position to get the ball away, but instead he chose to kind of try and fight with Sessegnon on the ball. It's like, no, just whack that ball away. And yes, Cesc did kind of just keep it very cool, thinking, you know, I've been at that club for years and I didn't really give them much because I wasn't available. So I think you can understand it. And the only thing he did right at the end was pointing to the Fulham badge, as if to say, this is kind of my home, which is absolutely fair enough. He's been there since he was a kid. Andrew was asked about him in the press conference after it. It was like, it was a really awkward question because, and he actually, to be fair, he handled it quite well. He said, look, obviously I'm probably the wrong person to speak to after a game, feeling emotional, disappointed with the defeat. But of course, yes, it was a great moment for Cesc, and you know, I'm really happy for him. I just wish it was against a different club. And yeah, hopefully this is a start for him now of something, just a kind of prolonged period of minutes. And he admitted afterwards that he kind of wants to have played more for Fulham as well. But yeah, I don't think anyone can begrudge him just having a light at the end of the tunnel, really, and what's been such a tough half a decade or more for him as well, really. And just not against Spurs, please. That'd have been nice.
Right, halfway through the pod now, so we're going to talk about the benefits of using NordVPN, something I believe you're going to be using over the next 2.5 weeks whilst you're on holiday.
2.5 weeks. I am escaping. Finally an international break. I'm normally having to sit there writing about nothing, things that aren't happening. And now I can do nothing. I can go and escape. And I am absolutely already planning to use NordVPN because there's quite a few bits where I'll be traveling between various places. And I've got a lot of shows that I want to watch right now. There's some great shows that have returned or coming out, and I'm going to use NordVPN to allow my device to think it is back home in the UK, so I can watch things wherever I may be on the other side of the globe. I am heading back to the States, actually, which I'm looking forward to. And I mean, NordVPN, we spoke about it so many times. I've used it so many times. You can not only use it to access things as if you're back in the UK, but you can do the flip side. If you're in the UK, you can use it to think it's in foreign countries. So that might mean you want to access watching streaming from other countries. It might mean that you want to book tickets to concerts, hotels, flights, holidays, whatever, really, but by doing it from the destination country rather than the country you're in. Very clever kind of service it all provides, and on top of all of that, it's the fastest VPN in the world, and that means no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. There's a security element to it as well. Whenever I'm connected to public Wi-Fi, I switch it on just in case. don't want to get all of our vital knowledge and things about Tottenham Hotspur and deep dark secrets. No, there's no real deep dark secrets. I think we can see everything that happens with Tottenham, every mess that happens. But on top of all of that, to get your best discount off on your NordVPN plan, we've got an exclusive link, which is nordvpn.com/gold guest. Our link gives you 4 extra months on top of the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link, in case you just missed it there, is in the podcast episode description box.
Right, let's get back on to talking about Ange Postecoglou and an incident. What happened after the game? It occurred after he walked through the tunnel. Craven Cottage, I think it's the Johnny Haynes stand you were in.
Yes.
I think it's a bit open once you go through the tunnel and then head back into the changing room, because I think that backs onto the famous cottage at the ground in West London. Someone shouted in Ange's direction, and, not for the first time this season, he has reacted. And there was a moment when Jed Spence and Matisse Tell tried to, get him back inside. Tell, having been speaking to the fans at the bottom of Spurs away end after the game, telling them the importance of, sticking together, he was acting the peacemaker again. So I know you've done an article on it today. What exactly happened then?
Well, first off, I should preface everything by saying this is happening too much with Postecoglou, regardless of who it was shouting, what they shouted. And I do agree, it's so difficult for people just to have abuse hurled at you and all words or, unpleasant words shouted at you and not respond. If you're a 59-year-old that's been in the game for 26 years and you want to tell your players to constantly be focused and not be distracted by this, that, and everything, you can't allow yourself to do it. And it's just too many times now. I remember asking him after a Spurs fan was lobbing kind of angry words at him from the behind the dugout at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and he just said, "Look, I don't want to be like, I don't want to. People can't abuse me. They can give criticism. That's absolutely fine. But if you're going to swear at me and abuse me, then I shouldn't have to stand for it." That's his thinking, and I get that, but it just looks like it gives this kind of indication to the especially the Spurs fan base that he's arguing and fighting with Spurs fans, which is never a good look. In this instance, I don't think, this is personal opinion, I don't think it was a Spurs fan. I think it's tried to be portrayed in that way. There's a slim chance it could still be a Spurs fan, but I would say the weight of odds is against that. And I'll explain why. So, as you said, the little historic building, the actual Craven Cottage within the stadium, the ground floor of that is where the changing rooms are. That's where the players come in and out of before and after the game. The away fans for this match were in the, I think it's the Putney End stand, it's called. I just want to check it. That is the name of it.
Yeah, it's Putney End.
Putney End stand. Yes, it is Putney End. So it's the area next to the Riverside stand. They're in that corner of the ground, which is right over the other side to where all of this happened. Where this happened is exactly like you said, the Johnny Haynes stand. It was just to the left, really, of the media box. And you can, like you said, kind of quite easily access and shout down at the people going down into the through this like covered walkway towards the changing rooms. And apparently this has happened before with Fulham fans in there trying to kind of wind up, I think, some of the opposing players, staff, whatever you want to call it. So some chap, in a kind of a slightly shrieking sort of way, said, shouted across when I saw Postecoglou and said, "Ange," and I'm going to beep here with the bad words so we don't get them. "Ange, what the beep was that, you beep head," let's say, at the end of that. What was that? What was that? And he's shouting at him. And to begin with, Postecoglou just glared at him. Then he kind of said back, "Just behave yourself." And then, as you said, Spence and Tell trying to take him away from it. And he kind of wasn't having it. And he just said, "Look, you're a young man, learn some manners." To which a member of the security staff kind of comes over and says, just the same thing, behave yourself. Tell goes over and says, hey, respect, man, to this guy. And then this guy says to the security staff, "I was just asking what it was or what that was." And look, the location of it makes me think it wasn't a Spurs fan. Yeah, of course, there'll be some Spurs fan dotted around the stadium. Of course there were. But this is just gut feeling, and people absolutely will have different opinions on this. I didn't feel like it was said with the anger of a Spurs fan. If a Spurs fan was saying that, I think there would be a lot more anger in it. To me, it felt like a goading thing in the way it was said. And the fact that it's all being filmed, the phone's in the person's hand as they're doing it kind of thing. It felt to me like someone trying to get a reaction, and Postecoglou once again gave them it. He's done that in the tunnel a couple of times, coming off at the Spurs stadium as well. We saw him kind of having a bit of back and forth. Was it at Bournemouth, I think, with the away fans?
Yeah, Bournemouth away in December. Yep.
Yeah. And regardless of whether this is a Spurs fan or not, it's just have a glare if you want, but then just walk off. You just got to take it, unfortunately. You've got to take it on the chin. Because I feel like this person was trying to get that. It's nice and shareable social media content for them to get out there. I wound up the Spurs manager, all of this. And it just looks like a man under pressure. It looks like a man struggling to deal with it. He often says he has a thick skin. He doesn't actually show that a lot, Postecoglou. We felt like, even like he went on this long monologue on Friday at the press conference, which was an interesting monologue about criticism and everything. But the question before, he'd said, it doesn't bother me. And then he goes into like a 5-6 minute discussion about criticism and how ridiculous it is. And it's kind of like, even in those moments, you're kind of contradicting yourself slightly, regardless of how interesting it is that you say, it shows that it is something that bothers you. And I do think it is, I think he's probably admitted this himself over the years, there is a bit of a chip on his shoulder because of the criticism he's had over the years, or the looking down and sneering upon his coaching background and where he's come from. And I do think there is that element to it. I think that inherently within him, he just cannot ignore when someone has a pop at him. But then you can't also say, I'm not bothered by it, if that's the complete opposite. So yeah, personally, I don't think it's a Spurs fan. I think it would be an unusual place for a Spurs fan to be, and it didn't feel like the anger of a Spurs fan. It could be completely wrong. That person may come out wearing their Spurs shirt and say, it was me. He fought with me. What a horrible, horrible man, and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, it all just felt very deliberate to me. But it does no favours to Postecoglou. It's another incident which, not great.
Yeah, he's under an awful lot of pressure now because that's Tottenham's 15th Premier League defeat of the season, which is just remarkable.
It's disgraceful. It's too many. Far too many.
Of course it is. And to be honest, it could be about 20 come the end of May, looking at the fixtures, and if Spurs carry on with this mixed form in the league, because there's Liverpool and Chelsea away, don't fare well there. Never done well at Anfield and Stamford Bridge. It's Aston Villa away, Forest at home, Brighton at home, two teams who are going to need the points for Europe. Spurs could quite easily be looking at 20 league defeats. And
19 is the Premier League record, isn't it? Was it under Ozzy? I think I remember saying that.
Okay, so I was having a look at Premier League table in the past few seasons, and a few teams have gone down, having lost 20 games.
Oh, yeah. They're lucky. The bottom three are horrendous this season.
What's helped Spurs out is they've not drawn too many.
Yeah.
I think it's three
How many
or four
Everton
games.
lost? It's probably way more than Everton as well.
Everton, we've lost 9.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just obviously not good enough, and need to put things right against Chelsea next up, and then Southampton after that. And as I was saying, Ange under intense pressure. There's Andoni Iraola at Bournemouth. He's been linked with the Spurs job. Marco Silva, Poch as well. His name's come up.
He likes an interview about Spurs, doesn't he, Poch? As much as I loved him, he doesn't shy away from the question.
No, he doesn't. So this was in an interview with Sky Sports. I think it came out today, basically saying that one day he hopes to return to Spurs. It's all going to be about the timing with Daniel Levy as well, even though he sacked him 6 years ago. There's still quite clearly a really strong relationship between them, and it does probably seem like only a matter of time before Poch does return. I know some Spurs fans have been saying, right, if Ange goes in the summer, just bring Poch back, but it's not as easy as that because of the job Poch is in at the moment. Head coach of the United States, this was probably a move that came out of the blue a bit last year, because you're thinking he'll still carry on in club football rather than turn into the international stage. But it's huge, this job he's got in charge of the United States. I don't think people realise the enormity of it heading into a home World Cup, where United States are going to be looking for probably the best ever finish in a tournament when there's been a large number of teams. And yeah, it's 32 years since the United States held the World Cup. Back in 1994, there was no professional league. MLS started 2 years later. This was a World Cup where it'd gone from the traditional football in heartlands to the United States, was a huge success.
Diana Ross up front.
the penalty, the opening
It was
ceremony.
so bad. I love that they had the big setup where the goal was supposed to separate, and all she had to do was hit it forward, and she missed.
But I mean, football in America has grown a huge amount to unprecedented levels over the past 30 plus years. The MLS, whereas it started with 10 teams back in 1996, there's 30 teams in it now because San Diego joined this season. So this is just a huge opportunity for America, for Pochettino to lead the US men's national team to a really, really strong World Cup. So it's not as easy as saying he'd walk out on the job to go back to Spurs. I'm thinking if Poch is going to go back to Spurs, it's going to be beyond 2026.
Yeah, there are sometimes I wish I covered an MLS side. San Diego sounds beautiful. My wife was obsessed at one point with when they were starting to build like Inter Miami up to what it would, like founding it. She was like, "Oh, couldn't you go and report on that? We could live in Miami." I was like, "Yeah, I don't think it really works like that." As it was, if I'd have gone and managed to do that, I'd be reporting on Messi every week. Maybe I should have
traveling time between games.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's true. She wouldn't have been happy with that, although she probably would have asked to come with. Yeah, the whole Poch thing. I was absolutely furious at the way he left the club back in the day, and the way it was all dealt with, and the lack of kind of backing he got as well in those two crucial transfer windows, and just the way it all went under the manager that's taken the Spurs the closest they've been to being something for decades, really. So absolutely, would I love to see him back at Spurs one day to kind of finish a job? Of course. I think there is unfinished business there, but he does also say it a lot. I don't think it's always helpful to other managers in position when he says it. I don't think fans will care about that, but I do think he wouldn't like it if the shoe was on the other foot, and that's doing. I mean, maybe he's looking for a little caretaker stint. Maybe just he's thinking, maybe I can get in there now and win the Europa League or something with Spurs, and just do that, and then go back to kind of managing the USA. Just win a trophy and head off into the sunset. That would be an amazing way, I suppose, to do it. But yeah, I'm with you. That's such an enormous thing that he's currently involved in. I don't think from over here in our Premier League bubble, maybe we can appreciate just how huge that is and how much of a game changer it could be to, even despite the massive strides taken with MLS. This is the thing, everyone keeps saying you can't say the MLS because it is Major League Soccer. You can't say the Major League Soccer. It's even with the build-up that's had over recent years, and of course Messi there now, it's mad, isn't it? When he doesn't play in a game, everyone kind of has huge tantrums because they paid loads of money thinking they're going to watch Messi. The pressure on him to stay fit must be incredible. But yeah, even with all of that, this would be enormous for football, or soccer as they call it in their country, if they could have a good World Cup and kind of harness a lot of the good feeling in the next generation of fans as well. So yeah, that would be kind of almost crazy to throw that away to go to, let's be honest, a club like Spurs. It could easily be there for 6 months and get chucked again. It's like, it is the most difficult club to probably sustain a period of time there in job security and safety. I mean, Postecoglou's under pressure. He's at the 18-month mark now. He was the first manager in half a decade to get a full season at Spurs. There's no guarantees at Spurs, whereas he has this huge thing on his hands. I actually think right now, I think this is another issue right now, if kind of there is any thoughts of removing Postecoglou from his position, is the mid-season alternatives. I just don't think there are. many around. Someone like Iraola, if he's going to consider Spurs from the safety and security of Bournemouth, it's not going to be mid-season. I would probably think that about quite a few of the ones out there. I also think a lot of the other candidates, I've seen some names put out there that aren't going to bring football that Spurs fans are going to be happy with. I think that's been an issue with recent seasons as well. That it's all very well saying this manager or that, and then they'll come in and play a brand of football that as soon as they start losing games, they don't even have that to fall upon. I think there's a few managers out there that are one club managers that have done well in one particular club, and can you replicate that in another? I think that's another thing. I just wonder whether everyone tries to get to the summer. Of course, look, if they keep losing, you have to kind of rescue it from a confidence perspective as well. I absolutely understand that, but I just wonder if there's a lack of. I mean, God, if you go back to Ryan Mason for a third spell in charge, that's essentially admitting that you're a chairman or an owner or whatever that's just got no real idea of the decisions to make to take the club forward. If you keep having to go back to the same caretaker manager each time, so yeah, I think there's a lot kind of riding on. Well, I mean, it's obvious to say it's the Europa League, isn't it? It's huge. It just is the be all and end all of this season now.
Yeah, it is. I know you did the piece yesterday on the football.london website. Even if Spurs don't win the Europa League in Bilbao in May, there is a potential route into Europe. This is I finished 11th.
Oh man, I've just gone on for a long enough monologue. They don't want to hear this. I mean, I've got to say, this is not all my work. This is the Premier League had worked this out, so it was there for me to kind of see and use and all of this. So yeah, the obvious way to have European football next season for Spurs is win the Europa League. I mean, that would be incredible. Not only would it break the trophy drought, but it also would give Spurs Champions League football next season, which they utterly do not deserve next season. That would be huge. So that's route one. That is potentially 5 games to get that. The other route, yes, is this very, very, very unlikely scenario that would bring European football down to 11th place in the Premier League. I'm going to very quickly rattle off what that would entail, and I'm sorry for anyone. You feel free to skip 15, 20, 30 seconds or however long it's going to take me to say this. Right. Okay. First off, all of this, every single one of these must fall into place. So Liverpool, Arsenal, Forest and City must all qualify for the Champions League as the top 4 teams in the division. Then Newcastle have to qualify in 5th place for the Champions League because it looks like England are currently on course with UEFA to get an extra place because of performances in Europe this season. So that's the top 5 covered. Next up in this unlikely scenario, Brighton would need to qualify for the Europa League by finishing 6th. Bear with me here. Bournemouth would have to finish 7th and qualify for the Europa League by winning the FA Cup. Still with me? This is not fun, I know. Chelsea, who are currently 4th, would have to have a bit of a free fall and finish 8th, and would also have to qualify for the Europa League by winning the Conference League. So we've got a big old clean sweep of European wins here, and it gets even more ridiculous, don't worry. That would have to continue with Villa finishing 9th, yet winning the Champions League. So it's a clean sweep in Europe of all of them. You never know, it might happen. Then Spurs or United, obviously in this scenario, it would have to be United, would have to finish 10th and qualify for the Champions League by winning the Europa League. And in that scenario, all of that filters down, and then the final Conference League place earned by Newcastle for winning the Carabao Cup on Sunday would filter down to the team in 11th place in the Premier League. So yes, it is about, it's just not likely. It's just really not likely, but you never know. And I mean, let's be honest, Brentford 11th at the moment. Spurs are 7 points off Brentford. So even getting to 11th would be an achievement in itself.
That's what I was going to say. All that could actually come off, but Spurs have no confidence in them finishing 11th. Honestly, the way it's going.
Spurs are so ridiculous that 2 things could happen this season. One, they could actually win the Europa League. and it would just make the most absurd season have this ridiculously amazing ending to it. Or, like you say, all of that incredible scenario happens and Spurs finish 12th. It would just be classic Spurs.
Or 17th.
Or 17th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 17th rather than 18th would be great.
Yeah, right. A few more things to round up before we call it a day. One of Tottenham's loan players, Brian Hill, he's got a bit of an injury at the moment for Girona. I think I saw one of the Girona players holding up a Gil shirt ahead of their game the other day. I think you said knee injury, is it?
Yeah, so according to reports in Spain, he's damaged the lateral ligament in his right knee and the meniscus. And I think I'm not sure if it's come out yet, but they were going to decide whether he has to have surgery or not. But either way, likely to miss the rest of the season.
Yep. Toby Alderweireld, someone who's now playing his football for Antwerp back in his native Belgium. He may have played his final game for the club because he got injured.
Final game ever.
Yeah. Go on then. What's the injury?
I feel so gutted for him. The reason we mention this is because obviously Alderweireld was such a huge part of Spurs over the years under Pochettino. I should also say with Brian Hill, we'll talk about this kind of as the months go on, but it could actually make it difficult for Spurs to sell him in the summer if he doesn't recover in time. If it's that bad, I don't even want to go there now. Toby Alderweireld, this is an absolute nightmare. So if you're not aware what's happened to Alderweireld since he left Spurs, obviously he went to, where was it? He went to the Middle East.
He did. I can't remember what club, but he was only there for a season, maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't long. And then he went to Antwerp, which are his hometown club, and it's been a bit of a fairy tale otherwise for him. You know, I think he went there and they won the Belgian Cup straight off the bat in his first season. Then a week later, he scored like this dramatic 94th minute goal that landed them their first league title in 66 years. It's been amazing for him there. However, I think they actually took him into the group stage of the Champions League for the first time ever as well. So this season, at the start of it, I think he retired from international football. I think he said something about panic attacks, wasn't he? He kind of stopped doing that. And then he said at the start of the season, that's it. I'm going to call it a day completely. At the end of this season, I'm going to have one kind of farewell tour, as it were, with Antwerp. And so what's happened, the regular season in Belgium has finished. It came to a close at the weekend. For anyone interested, Westerlo, where Alfie Devine and Luka Vuskovic are, had a terrific. They beat Beerschot, the bottom team, on the final day. And actually, they're not in the relegation playoffs, which I think was unexpected for them. They're in 9th place. And they've got a chance to get the Conference League. I think they're going to be in the playoff for that. So brilliant for Devine and Vuskovic. Well, what's happened with Antwerp? Antwerp are in the little top section, which I think is the top 5 or 6 teams. They get to play off essentially to be the champion. It's a very different system over there. So in the final game of the regular season, I watched kind of what happened. He goes in for a sliding tackle, Alderweireld, and just it's a very awkward way his leg goes down. And what turns out he's torn a quadriceps muscle, which we saw with Destiny Udogie, didn't we, last season? And this is a bit of a nightmare because those injuries, it's normally about 3 months you're out for. So the playoffs in the Belgian kind of next stage of their season ends on May the 25th, and any potential playoff match would be a week later. So you're looking very early June. That's going to be tight. And he is devastated because he feels like that'll end up being his last ever professional match, that one where he injured himself in. So he put like quite an emotional message on social media. And now it's just this race against time for Alderweireld to kind of play another game in his career for his hometown club. And it's incredibly sad if it ends that way. Look, he's had a great career. So it's not like, he's missed out on everything. And he's had some wonderful times with Antwerp. But I think all Spurs fans would love to see him play one last game and it be a big playoff match.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is with how it's set up in Belgium, you don't know when your last game's going to be. It's not like in the Premier League where your last game of the season's end of May and you can plan for that, even if it's just bring him on for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, it's true.
You just don't know when that last game is. But yeah, he's just been a fairy tale, like you said, at Antwerp. If you've not seen his last minute goal to win the league title, honestly, have a look. It's incredible. What
amazing. He was playing with Vincent Janssen as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, because I think at that point, I think it was Genk they were playing. I think Genk could win the league, or Genk
Yeah.
were, winning the league as it stood with
Yeah, it
a
was
point,
so
and
close,
then
wasn't it? They were
Alderweireld
2-1 down,
scored.
I think, weren't they?
Yeah, something like that. But
Mm.
yeah, fantastic for Tuppy, and hopefully does get one final appearance in. But as you said, might be looking unlikely now.
Yeah.
One final thing then in regards to Tottenham, there was the season ticket prices. They came out last Friday, and there's been a freeze on them. I think that'll have gone down well, especially given the increase for this season and what's happened this season. But I think in general, fans probably would like there to be a bit of a decrease in the prices, but that's just not going to happen. So good news.
Yeah, I guess. It's like,
Well, at
they're
least
not
they've not
going
gone
up.
up.
Yeah, exactly. They're not gone up. I agree. I can imagine a lot of Spurs fans saying, hello, we're absolutely reduced rather than being frozen. But I think it would have been absolutely disgraceful if after a season like this, Spurs had gone, we're putting them up. There's no defending that decision. You just can't.
United
sure-
have put theirs up though, haven't they? I think by 5%. I think they have.
Okay, maybe some clubs can defend it then. I just don't think Spurs could. I think it would just been just ridiculous. It's season ticket price. I think it's match day ticket prices as well have all been frozen. There was the senior concession tickets. There's some kind of to and fro on that. I think there's an element of it that's been walked back, but it's still not quite the same. But yeah, overall, it had to happen. It couldn't be increased again. But yeah, I think everyone's just in that mood right now. It's like no one's going to celebrate. It's just like this. It's just been such a horrendous season.
Yep. Right, on that positive ending, we'll
Yay!
call it a day on today's latest episode of Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. Lee Wilmot will be joining me on the next one. I think it's going to be early April when you're back after the Southampton game. Yes,
Yeah,
head of Eintracht Frankfurt.
Yeah, maybe. If I'm back any sooner, I'll jump on, of course.
Yeah. Right, we'll call it a day. As ever, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/gold guest. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box.